and welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Really excited about this. This is our first installment of the DailyClout Film Club. Appreciate everybody joining us. We'll get off to a fast start here. Let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Craig Klein. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for DailyClout, and I'm really, really excited to introduce you today to Claire. What we're going to do is Claire will introduce herself and talk a little bit about her background, and then we're going to run the film. It's relatively short. I think it's about less than 20 minutes. And then Claire will take your questions after we've played the film. Let's see. Claire, like I say, we're really excited to have you join us, and just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of give everybody a little background on who you are and why you made this film.
Hi, I'm Claire. I am from Mississippi, and I guess for the sake of the film, I'll go a bit more into personal stuff as well, not just my film background. I was raised as a homeschool kid in Macomb, Mississippi, one of 6 children, and as a Jehovah's Witness. And so when I got older, I was introduced to film through a little film company that I made with my friends. And around that same time, we started leaving the truth, or leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. And but something that was really pivotal in that was actually that Jehovah's Witnesses are very, they speak against voting and doing things like that. And my mom actually had gotten involved in some legislation in Mississippi because Mississippi has never had rights for children going to school for vaccinations. So there's no philosophical or religious exemptions. So when she sent my siblings to school and she sent me to school, we had to be vaccinated. And she was like, why is that? And kind of dug into the research and found out a lot about vaccines that she never had known. And this is like pre-censorship era. So we started traveling and going to different protests in Atlanta, Georgia, and all these different state capitals. And at first I was like, this woman is crazy. I was like, she has no, what is wrong with her? She was saying something completely different than, what all my teachers at school were saying, and, what you found on Google. And what changed things for me was when I met a girl who was my age who had been injured by the Rogam shot when her mom was pregnant. And they had sued in court and won, and it had been documented that she had been injured by a vaccine. And that kind of changed my life. I watched the film Vaxxed, and I kind of delved into my film career. And at this point, I was still JW. I was never baptized, so I didn't really have that kind of falling out. And so when I got to my teenage years, when I went off to school, I kind of just separated myself from it. And after 1 year of college, I dropped out because I worked with the High Wire. So I don't know if anyone here knows them, but the High Wire of Del Bigtree is a big news platform, independent media platform. And so I worked with them for a summer and realized I was wasting my time in school. So I left school and I found a mentor in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he taught me everything that I know now. And after about a year of that mentorship, I had decided before, I was like, I'm not going to talk about the vaccine stuff. I'm going to stay away from it and whatever else. And I kept on being called to that kind of work. So for those who've seen the film Vaxxed or Vaxxed 2, there's a mother in it, and her name's Polly Tommy. And I had actually met her when they were on tour, when my mom was taking us to these protests. And I went to visit them in Austin, Texas, and they were about to make a film called Vaxxed 2, and I decided to work on it with them. And so they took me onto the team graciously, and they're people that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And we made this film, which is basically a compilation of over 7,000 vaccine injury stories that Polly Tommy hosted as she traveled across the country and heard all these parents' stories of what had happened to their children following vaccinations. And so after that film was finished, I worked on it with Brian Burrows and Toby Tommy, who are also awesome. I was asked by Andy Wakefield to work on one of his films called 1986, The Act, which is about the Vaccine Injury Act in 1986 that took away liability from vaccine manufacturers. So we finished that film, and then a year later, I was brought this story in Kenya about these women who had been sterilized, and a few doctors on the ground had tested the vaccines and found these neonatal tetanus vaccine campaigns that the WHO was doing. They took some of the samples, tested them, and found that they had anti-fertility agents in them, and did interviews with someone who came to me and gave me the footage and said, hey, I don't know what to do with the story, but here it is. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I reached out to Andy, and Children's Self-Defense connected me with the person initially. And so we made this film about infertility and fertility regulating vaccines. And so right as we were finishing that, Polly Tommy asked me to work on this trucker convoy. And I had never done reporting before, never been on camera before, made me super uncomfortable. I just love making documentaries. I like being behind the camera. I still have like trouble with that. But I traveled with these truckers for 30 days, and they were protesting in America. They went all the way from California to DC, and they were protesting the vaccine mandates. And hearing their stories, getting to know them, creating a community with these people. After 30 days of reporting on it, I had all that footage, and I decided to make a film about it. So we made a film about that. And that's how I met Naomi. So after I met Naomi, after I made Between Peace and War, she kind of came to me and was like, hey, I love the work you're doing, and I want to support you telling all kinds of stories. And that's how this film came about. I was looking around me and saw that everyone in my family, all these people that I loved, who had always traditionally not vaccinated their kids, who had homeschooled, who had done the organic, natural way, I saw them getting the COVID vaccine and pushing other people to do so, and isolating and staying home longer than the majority of the country. And I was super confused because growing up, I thought that Jehovah's Witnesses were like these free thinkers, right? Like we denied having blood transfusions and things like that. And so to the point of like, if someone were to die because of that, they would die for those religious beliefs. And to then force someone to get a vaccine and wear a mask, it just like didn't sit right with me, and it was confusing to me. And I knew other people in the Kingdom Halls that felt that way, who felt like they couldn't speak out. And so through some of the forums, some of the JW forums and other places, I hosted telephone interviews with these people and dug a little bit deeper. And that's what we're going to watch today.
Yeah. Wow. So there's so much there. What I think is so cool about this, Claire, is that in a way you're kind of an OG in the vaccine world. You were talking about vaccines before COVID, right? There's a lot of us who got on board because of COVID, right? But when Vaxxed was made, how long ago was that?
Vaxxed was made, I think it came out when I was like 15 or 14. Yeah. So I watched that, and I had like my whole kind of paradigm shift fall, the whole world fall around me when I was like 15 years old, which I'm 23 now. So I think it was around like 2015 or 2016 when it came out. And I remember it was actually a time where discussions were actually a lot more open, oddly enough. So COVID's kind of shut a lot of people up, especially in the school systems. But I had like a really cool teacher in high school, my government teacher. He gave me an entire classroom to like, our class period, to go through like vaccine mandates in Mississippi and what our political, or not our political group, but our protesting Mississippi Parents for Vaccine Rights, what that group was doing, trying to, get rights for children in school. And I had some friends that came along with me, and it wasn't as controversial. I think back in that time, people were really open to having the conversation as long as it wasn't about like polio or something, or like smallpox.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very aware before, and so for years, people like Barbara Loe Fisher with NBIC, and like I said, Polly Tommy and Del Bigtree, all these people were talking about children's self-defense. Bobby Kennedy were talking about how they were coming for the adults, and I always just kind of thought like, well, yeah, like, but it's not going to happen like that soon, right? Like I kind of saw it happening, like maybe when I had kids or something, but I started getting more and more weary of it. And we actually had this protest in Washington, D.C. Called the Vi Event. And a bunch of people showed up. And it was specifically them talking about how vaccine mandates are coming, vaccine passports are coming for adults. You're not going to be able to fly. You're not going to be able to go to a restaurant. And I still was like, okay, but that's a bit extreme, right? Like it can't be happening that soon. And lo and behold, in February 2020 hits, and everyone around me was terrified, and I was scared. I mean, like, everyone was scared. We didn't know what was going on, and I think that but as it hit, I knew something is wrong. I knew it wasn't just like a pandemic, right? I knew that they were going to try to use this to strip us of our rights, and just like they have with measles, polio, other diseases in the past. And if you didn't know that history, going into the situation, you would probably be pretty scared and maybe listen to whatever they told you to do. And so I try to avoid saying I told you so, because I feel like that's mean.
Well, before we get into the film, because I know that people will have a lot of questions about the film, but if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about the Freedom Convoy for those that don't know about it, because it wasn't very well covered on the news, of course. What was it, and how long were you there, and what happened?
So to give a bit of background, the Canadian truckers were being barred by the government from going over the border, right? Because they didn't have their vaccines. And so a lot of people were losing their livelihoods because they couldn't cross the border and come back into Canada without being vaccinated. And truckers are like the most isolated group of the workforce pretty much in general. I mean, they really don't come in contact with anyone. They're sitting alone in their truck all day. So a big group of these truckers went and protested in Ottawa at the Capitol in Canada. And it ended up not just being truckers, but thousands of other citizens coming, and they literally shut down the city downtown and stayed there for about a month. And in the end, we saw, Justin Trudeau, the prime minister, he was shutting down bank accounts, right? There was police brutality and arrests. And so, but at the same time, they dropped their mandates. And so America felt very inspired by that, but also kind of pissed off by how horribly Canada treated their people. And so it wasn't just America that rose up. A bunch of other countries had protests following what happened in Canada. But truckers in America had the same idea. And so that was really weird for me, right? Because it's always been moms in the movement. Like it was always the moms leading the way, especially with vaccine rights and bodily autonomy, medical freedom, health freedom. And to see so many men show up was like mind-blowing. So they started with like 30 trucks in California. Like I said, Polly Tommy was like, I have an idea. Like, you guys should rent an RV, and CHGTV will send you out, and you guys will do live reporting every day and travel with this convoy. And so I called up one of my friends, Ariana Victor, and I had worked on her. She was the narrator, actually, of Infertility, A Diabolical Agenda. And she agreed to come with me like 2 days before, and we flew out to California. We like rented this RV. I'd never driven an RV before. It was this whole thing. We stocked it up, and we like drive to some like old abandoned racetrack, which is where everyone was meeting the first day. And there was like 30 trucks there, right? And my first interaction with the truckers was like, okay, like a bunch of people were texting my mom, like, are you sure, like, you're okay with her being like with all these truckers? Like, is that dangerous? And my mom was like, she'll be fine. And so, yeah, we woke up the next morning and there was hundreds of people there, like out of nowhere. And it was this massive send off of flags and dancing. And it wasn't just like one kind of demographic, right? Like we saw all kinds of people there, all different races, ages, sexes. And like you saw different, even political parties there that were just kind of saying like, hey, we should put politics aside. We shouldn't have to have a vaccine to have basic human rights. And so they started in California and stopped in cities all along the way until they made it to Washington, D.C. And the first stop, we had the vice chief of the Navajo Nation host us. And the Navajo people cooked for everybody, and we sat around the fire, and it was like so fun. It was a second stop, and just as we went along, like every single city, there was more and more people, and every single overpass. Like the first day, I thought it would stop after the first day for some reason, but it didn't. It like literally you would see just bridge after bridge after bridge of just full of people with flags, and they're smiling and they're waving, and there's kids. And we stopped at some of the overpasses and talked to people along the way. And every single night, very quickly, I got to be friends with the leadership of the convoy, because we were the reporters, and they just took such good care of us. Like, being two girls who are clueless in an RV, they were like so protective over us. Like, if anybody bothers you, you let us know. And they refilled our tanks, and they drained our tanks, and I think our heat went out, and our water froze over in the bathroom. We couldn't use it, and they helped us with all those things. It was such a beautiful experience. And by the time we got there, these people truly felt like family. So we got to Hagerstown, Maryland, and then there's this whole kind of idea of, what is going to happen, right? Because they're going to the city to protest, but they didn't want to repeat what happened in Ottawa, and there are children there, there's old people there, there's so many people who would be susceptible to, if something were to happen with the police, some kind of altercation. And so we never were given the opportunity to even have that altercation, because DC police started shutting down all the exits entering the city, and until the convoy would leave. And so the rest of what happened is in the film that I made. And to me, it did awaken something in me that made me realize that we aren't alone, and that there's so many people out there that have woken up during all this COVID nonsense and confusion, and that regardless of someone's political party or race, gender, ethnicity, all these things, right? Like, I saw thousands of people coming together for one cause, and it was truly inspiring.
So, where can people find that film?
We're working on it, Craig.
Oh, it's not been released yet? I didn't know that.
No. It has been released. So the way it happened was my mom, actually, who is, once again, she's been very involved in the movement for a long time. She asked me to make it, right? So she was like, I would just make a small thing for this Health Freedom Summit that they do every year. And so I couldn't just make a small thing. And so I kind of made it on accident. And when I was done with it, I had some friends who work on the War Room, and they were like, we're going to play that. Like, it's great. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really have like a plan. So what I'd like to have in the future, which we can send out in an email blast eventually, is a website just dedicated to it. And I want to give it to people for free. And it's always been for free. But if you search Between Peace and War, someone might have pirated it and put it somewhere. And okay. I just want people to watch it.
Okay. Yeah. I remember seeing it on the War Room, and yeah, it was amazing. It must have been such a great experience to be part of that. It was how many days
so cool.
to get to DC?
10. It was 10 days. I think we got there day 11. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's get to the film. just to remind everybody, there's been a lot of people that joined us after we got started. Once we've played the film, then Claire will be available for questions. So you can type your questions into the chat there, and we'll be keeping an eye on that, and try to get all your questions answered here after we're played it. So with that being said, let me see if I can figure out the technology and start it.
I had the illusion that we were free thinkers, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was raised in a cult.
I think they're Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes!
We're very close now to smoking out Osama bin Laden. They got 1,600 Marines there in Afghanistan, and they're going cave to cave. And these Marines, they are very shrewd. They're disguising themselves as Jehovah's Witnesses.
A lot of people don't know much about Jehovah's Witnesses and often get them confused with Mormons with white shirts and helmets on bikes. Because of their religious beliefs regarding blood transfusions, many Jehovah's Witnesses will refuse them, even on their deathbeds. There's a long-standing history of the medical establishment forcing blood transfusions upon Jehovah's Witnesses against their will. In response to this, Jehovah's Witnesses have been at the forefront of research in finding a way to avoid blood transfusions with new technologies and procedures.
The lessons we learned in the early stages of bloodless medicine and surgery with the Jehovah's Witness clearly translated over to all of the rest of our patients. So the field now really of blood conservation includes the use of multiple alternatives in a planned way to avoid the need to transfuse a patient with someone else's blood.
They've won many court cases focusing on informed consent and medical freedom. There are over 8.6 million Jehovah's Witnesses in the world, spanning over 239 countries. In the 1880s, an avid Bible reader named Charles Russell formed what was known at the time as the Bible Students. His initial intention was bringing together Christians of all kinds. He didn't believe in labels like being called a Baptist or a Catholic. He believed in helping people become Bible readers, that they read the Bible, that they understood the Bible, and that they shared what the Bible had to say with other people. In the book Crisis of Conscience, a former governing body member of Jehovah's Witnesses tells a first-hand account of how their religion progressively became the intensely devoted, uniform group we see now. A sect of Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses reject any teaching that isn't strictly in the Bible, like blood transfusions or holidays. My entire life, I missed out on birthday parties, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, any of the holidays that American people traditionally celebrated. My earliest memories are going door to door and preaching to people about the good news, how the end was near, and if you followed this list of rules and joined our church, you could have everlasting life. Like many Jehovah's Witnesses, I was homeschooled. When I finally went to public school at 11 years old, I remember going up to the front of the classroom and talking to my teacher about how I wouldn't be able to say the Pledge of Allegiance. The fear I felt when all my classmates were staring at me with my hands by my side, while theirs were on their heart. I was taught that we were separate from the rest of the world. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that they are the only ones that will survive the Great Tribulation, or Armageddon. They literally label the rest of the world as worldly. We had a special knowledge that we were different than the rest. Being raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I had the illusion that we were free thinkers, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was raised in a cult. You see, this organization was known as a highly controlled organization, and many people call it a cult, and it's disputed whether or not that's the proper term. I started seeing through the cracks as I got older. My older sister and I were studying the Bible with a member of the congregation. When my sister told her that she was going to pursue higher education and go to college, the member ended the Bible study with both of us because higher education is highly discouraged.
Higher education often instills a sense of superiority and self-reliance that is in direct opposition to the Christian personality. The most intelligent and eloquent professors will be trying to reshape the thinking of your child, and their influence can be tremendous. It requires faith to decline higher education and have the confidence that our material needs will be cared for by training in other fields.
Jehovah's Witnesses quite literally shun someone if they have any form of misconduct that violates what it means to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Because I didn't have a hatred for what's bad, I couldn't see anything wrong with my choices.
This eventually led me to do things I later regretted. I ended up getting disfellowshipped.
Sonia Erickson has been disfellowshipped.
It crushed my whole family.
It is announced publicly in front of the congregation if someone is disfellowshipped. When you are baptized, it is a seal on your contract with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you can only come back through a very special process. For years, I never spoke to my grandmother because she was disfellowshipped. She wasn't allowed to come to our house to speak to us. We were not meant to have any association with her whatsoever, unless if it was sharing publications from the Jehovah's Witnesses. Around 16 years old, I stopped attending Jehovah's Witness meetings. My story isn't like most people who leave the Jehovah's Witnesses. Disfellowshipping has harsh consequences. But because I was never baptized, I was still able to maintain my relationship with most of my family members in the organization. That is, until COVID hit. I watched what I thought to be millions of independent thinkers lining up to get their vaccines, wearing masks, staying home. A group that was always unified became more unified through manipulation tactics and propaganda.
From the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is JW Broadcasting.
This is JW Broadcasting.
JW Broadcasting.
The COVID-19 pandemic.
COVID-19.
The coronavirus pandemic has taken a grim toll around the world.
In some parts of the world, the coronavirus is beginning to spread more quickly.
This global pandemic has thrown the world into a state of uncertainty.
On a global scale, it was unlike anything Jehovah's people had yet experienced in the 21st century.
Everyday life for many of us has been disrupted in ways we might never have imagined.
Highly contagious variants are spreading, and the pandemic is raging like never before. As Jehovah's Witnesses, we do not have a religious objection to vaccination. We're happy to report that about 50% of the worldwide Bethel family have been vaccinated so far. Here in the United States, more than 98% of our Bethel family have chosen to get vaccinated. In harmony with those government regulations,
the authorities,
government superior authorities, medical and government authorities regarding steps that can be taken to prevent the spread of the virus.
A religion that promoted medical freedom over mandated medical treatments was suddenly coercing its members into following all government regulations for a different medical treatment. I spoke with people on the fence, those who had already left, and those who are still in the organization, to try and find out what was going on.
The organization was meeting on Zoom electronically for our meetings.
You know, they said on the news it was like the 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Totally no contact.
And of course they kept telling us and stressing over and over about wearing masks whenever we go out.
We're just sitting back shocked. I can't believe it. Things became very impersonal.
These sisters, they weren't really educated enough in trying to learn how to use their devices. And one night said something about going over. They were just trying, more or less telling us, you know, it's off limits.
I felt separated from the congregation because, oh no, you can't come here if you don't wear a mask.
Because of the long-standing history of shunning people who go against the grain, one could immediately see how this could be taken advantage of during a pandemic.
Some among us have very close family members or friends who have left the truth and are now disfellowshipped, and that's painful.
Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are labeled as apostates, and associating with them is seen as dangerous. Any outsider information is part of Satan's world.
We must reject the voice of strangers.
I tried to tell her about the dangers of the vaccine. She just told me that the only news that she was going to refer to was what was on jw.org, even though I was telling her where she could go and find the information about how these vaccinations are affecting people. But she just shook her head like, we are not socializing with you at this time until you change your attitude about Jehovah's earthly organization and representatives and stop your open and unrestrained association with the fellowship one.
For a Jehovah's Witness to listen to what I'm saying right now would be considered a sin.
Satan continues his work as an evil ventriloquist using not serpents, but human puppets to enunciate his voice, these acting as his agents, either wittingly or unwittingly. But what does the voice of strangers say on this subject? Don't trust the faithful slave. He will mislead you. And who often have the loudest voice promoting this false message? Apostates.
That if they ever listen to the words of apostates, they will not receive everlasting life.
If we're deceived into accepting the counterfeit words of apostates, we'll lose our life.
It just shows you the strong influence that they have over them and how they can manipulate your thinking and into doing things.
In truth, a great darkness surrounds Jehovah's Witnesses, and many of them are manipulated, lied to, and highly controlled.
What on earth can bring that kind of fear?
And the root of all of it is an entity that has become more and more prominent since the founding of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body.
The governing body. The governing body.
Governing body. The governing body.
The governing body.
Whether the direction we receive comes from the governing body, the branch, our circuit overseer, or the elders, we want to follow that direction closely.
At the top, you have the governing body, and below that, the circuit and district overseers, and then the elders of the individual congregations. The circuit overseer, the district overseer, and the elders bring about the will of the governing body.
We see clearly how the direction that we've received over the years indicates that Jehovah's clearly with his people, with his organization, with the governing body, those who are taking the lead. Why would we question the direction we're getting now?
It is believed that this group of men are chosen by God to bring about his will on earth.
We want to follow that direction closely. It's good practice as we head into even more turbulent times ahead.
Their doctrine is apocalyptic based, that the end is near and Armageddon is coming tomorrow, driving fear into their members and achieving high control.
We're living in the last days of this system of things.
These last days,
the Great Tribulation, that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
In other words, you won't be receiving everlasting life if you don't listen to the governing body, which is truly treated the same as the Word of God. Fear is used to close off entire communities of people. In fact, they only resumed their in-person meetings as of April 2022.
So we just started meeting back in person again back in April.
Since April, I've been going back. I've been going back to the meetings, and my wife and I, we just wear our mask.
Everybody is still strongly encouraged to wear masks in the Kingdom Hall. It's not mandatory, but we do strongly encourage all of the brothers and sisters to wear masks.
That's what the majority do, almost all of them. There might be one or two, maybe babies don't, put on a mask, but everybody else, for right now, they're putting on masks.
95% of the friends are still wearing masks. Very, very high percentage. The vast majority of the organization is vaccinated, and many are boosted too. It's not mandatory, but it was highly encouraged by the organization that if somebody could get vaccinated, they recommended it.
Last year they were recommended.
Just because of how much safety and immunity it brought with it. They had such good results from the vaccinations that they were really encouraging vaccination.
Some people have immune systems that even the vaccine would be harmful, so they decide not to. So we leave that up to them. That's for you to decide. That's your personal business.
My intention and my hope here is to start the conversation. Jehovah's Witnesses are so closed off from the outside world that no one even knew this was going on.
Do you think that people are getting the vaccine because of the social pressure of the thought of maybe being disfellowshipped for that?
They're not saying you have to get this, and yes, God wants you to get. They're not saying that, but that's what's coming across.
I just got a message from a friend, and he told me his brother got this fellowship because he was talking against it.
During World War II, we had brothers and sisters that died in concentration camps because they would not compromise their belief. They were told to go out door to door. They were told to, keep preaching, not to stop worshiping God. And they lost their lives over it. And we're supposed to cower at home? So I have a real problem with that. The whole premise of Jehovah's Witnesses is that we're not supposed to follow the world governments, only God's government. And then all of a sudden during COVID, we're supposed to blindly follow these government agencies that are supposedly being led by Satan. I was disfellowshipped after 24 years on Zoom, on a phone call, and it was because I had rocked the boat, because I just didn't wholeheartedly say, okay, I'm going to do this for Christian unity, or, to go along with the faithful and discreet slave. I had an opinion, and I had things that contradicted their narrative, and that is not to be allowed.
I mean, that's pretty strong, to be disfellowshipped because they speak out against it or they question it, even if they question it.
Not complying with the governing body recommendations meant endangering the congregation, and in some cases resulted in disfellowshipping.
When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in 2020, we all received direction, including new ways to attend our meetings and carry out our ministry, and ways to comply with the secular authorities. Did you disagree? Or did you have a different idea? If so, did you follow the direction anyway and give it your support? If you did, then you contributed to our unity.
In the name of unity, Jehovah's Witnesses were coerced into following lockdown procedures and receiving the experimental injections.
We cannot afford to care more about our privileges, our pride, or our opinions than we do about Christian unity. If we put our own wants first, we place the congregation's unity in plain view for Satan to snatch.
Anything to get someone from the outside world into the Kingdom Hall, but once converted, they must follow every rule.
We just want you to come and attend. We want you to be there. That's what's most important.
From my personal experience, many Jehovah's Witnesses have good intentions, and it's a true tragedy that many of them are misled.
Well, that's really helpful, because, like I said, I was just trying to figure out what the vibe was.
No, the vibe is whatever it takes to get you to the Kingdom Hall so you can get fellowship and you can learn and you can be comfortable and safe. That's the vibe. That's all we're interested in.
Yeah, if you felt comfortable, we'd love to have you attend either one of those meetings, whatever works out best for your schedule. If you have any other questions, this is my cell phone that I called from, so just feel free to reach out or text or if you need anything else.
As for those who are misleading them, however, I cannot say the same of their intentions.
If we say we love Jesus, and we're not like Christendom with this proclamation of their love for Jesus, they really don't even know the real Jesus, frankly, till you get an accurate knowledge of the truth. But if we're in the truth, we're dedicated, baptized servants of Him, if we really love Him, we're going to observe His word. Now that means not just carrying out the kingdom, putting our time and energy into it, it also means money.
In delving through every piece of information I could get my hand on, and searching for conflicts of interest and financial incentives, the intricate maze of corporations and nonprofits of the Jehovah's Witnesses ended up being a fruitless endeavor. It is unclear why a religion formerly devoted to medical freedom transformed into a vessel of vaccine coercion. The motive behind this push is still a mystery to be uncovered.
Wow. Really awesome, Claire.
Thank you.
I just kind of feel kind of gobsmacked, because it's so stark. The shift in position, policy, or whatever. Great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I it's kind of a different when you watch it as someone who made it, and it's such a personal thing, and it's just really sad because I think, for the first 16, 17 years of my life, all my memories, all my friends half of my family, like they're in this organization and I care for them so deeply. And my goal is to never, ever bash those people, right? And to never talk down on those people or to be condescending to them, but to show, like, I am angry as a filmmaker at these people, at the governing body, right? At this leadership who have misled people that I love and destroyed relationships, possibly even hurt many people by encouraging them to get these experimental injections. And that's why I felt called to make this, right? Because nobody is talking about it. And I know that by making this, it does put me at a certain amount of risk with family members, you know, and things like that, where I even was talking to somebody the other day who reached out to me and he knew I was making it. He's an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And he was like, look, I would share your trailer. He's like, but I don't want to get cut off by my family on, you know, whatever side, whatever relationship is left because I've been disfellowshipped would be destroyed even if I shared it. That's how serious this is. So for the people watching it, the people who are able to share it, you know, my hope is to bring some clarity that, you know, you're not alone if you're questioning the governing body right now.
Right. Well, and for those that are not, you know, associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, I think this is a really stark example of what has happened in all aspects of life. You know, our leaders across the board have just sort of put their head between their legs. And I guess let's see, one question that Amy asked earlier, are they still, is this still their position? Are they still pushing the vaccine and the boosters and so on and so forth?
So I haven't looked as much into the boosters. I know that they are just now lifting their mask mandates for the meetings, in-person meetings. So they lifted those. And I think they kind of stopped saying their positioning on it a little bit more recently. I don't think that they have rescinded or like taken it back, right? But they've just kind of gone a bit quiet about it, especially after, you know, we have this widespread kind of flood that it doesn't stop transmission, right? So, but no, I'm the people that I know who are in it and they're really in it, like have been boosted and they're like all the way up to date. And even one of the people that I talked to that's in the film, he said that too. Most people are vaccinated and boosted, and wearing masks still. And I saw someone else had said on the side that something about like PPE money.
Right.
And I looked into like, it's virtually impossible. There's a lot of hearsay, right, on all these forums about different corporations that Jehovah's Witnesses are a part of, and you have like, you know, the Watchtower Tract. It's all these different like corporations, and some of them aren't even called have anything to do with Watchtower, etc. So I went through like all the spreadsheets from the CARES Act money and searched for anything I could find, which a lot of churches took that money. A lot of churches. It's not just Jehovah's Witnesses. But my suspicion, and I have nothing to base this on, this is just like my personal opinions, is that there's definitely some sketchy stuff that's been going on. You know, they bought their property from a pharmaceutical company, sold their property headquarters worth millions of dollars in New York and moved it up to Walk Hill. But it was initially in Brooklyn and they sold it to, you know, another pharmaceutical company. And just how much they've been tied into these like innovations and blood transfusions and stuff like that as well. It definitely, to me, I know something's going on, but as a filmmaker, it was virtually impossible to put your finger on anything. But what I could observe and what the story I could tell was that we can see how they've been manipulating people through their propaganda into getting the vaccine. We don't know why, but it's clear that they're doing it, and they're not being neutral about it at all. They're basically saying you're going to die in Armageddon if you don't get this vaccine.
Well, and something to just dig into and clarify a little more. Prior to COVID, my understanding is the position of the Jehovah's Witness was that vaccines were a bad idea, right? Is that true?
Yeah, well, and so once again, that was so if you look at their documents, like back from, so they have these, for those who don't know much about Jehovah's Witnesses, they have these publications going back since they started. Like the founder, Russell, like that was kind of his thing. He started this newspaper, and it ended up being called the Watchtower. And basically, this religion has been deep in propaganda since the beginning. But I think it was founded with good intentions. But when you look back at the older stuff they used to publish, they used to talk about how vaccinating was basically a violation of God's perfect creation. And they have tons of different articles and references in about the 40s, 50s, 60s of them basically saying you shouldn't be vaccinated. And then they kind of didn't take a stance, right? So around the 70s and 80s, they kind of just went quiet about it. And then like the 90s hit, and you look at their publications, and then they start saying things like, oh, like it's just a personal choice. Everyone can kind of decide. And it's interesting because with blood transfusions, they were so adamant, like, no, like, you shouldn't have a blood transfusion. Like, if you have a blood transfusion, once again, you're not receiving everlasting life. Like, you're not going to go to paradise. Like, you're done. Paradise is kind of their word for heaven. And so I thought it was really interesting that more recently they started saying that. But in the places, the less urbanized areas, like I was raised in a small town in Mississippi. I went to a small congregation in Mississippi. Like, most people didn't vaccinate their kids, and a lot of them homeschooled their children, had minimal vaccines, and that was kind of like a norm, an unspoken norm. You couldn't really find that, but in the communities itself, like most people I knew, it was the case. And so I actually know people who did not vaccinate their kids, did not give their kids a single vaccine, and everyone in their family is vaccinated for COVID and boosted. So it's like night and day difference, which is really interesting how a group that was so devoted to not altering in their view, naturally, how their perfect created bodies, into all of a sudden altering them.
Right. Yeah, that's, I didn't fully understand that that sort of position change evolved over a period of time, but way it's pretty stark. And towards the end of the film, you talk about trying to do the research of what was the financial situation, right? And I'm not surprised that it's extremely opaque. I mean, that's what we've seen everywhere, right? Even the relationship between the local governments and big pharma. People have connected those dots, but they're not easy to connect.
Well, even with like if you look in the past, like Russell was the guy who founded it, and they kind of stuck to being Russellites. And then when Rutherford came in, he's the kind of guy who came up with the term Jehovah's Witnesses and turned it into a corporation, and really started pushing this like business model. So some people in the comments are talking about that too. It's very true that like the governing body is mainly like, they're the problem, right? It's like the average person there has been misled into thinking that these people are basically the voice of God, and so they're doing everything they're saying. But where is the governing body getting their direction from, right? Like, who's influencing them? And we don't know who that is, and it's very hard to find out.
Yeah. Well, I think, as you said earlier, your suspicions are similar to most of us, I think. Let's see. Let me try to get some of these questions here. Let's see. So Dynamo's asking, do you have backup recordings? In where
Yeah.
specifically we're talking
About the what?
about the vaccination, the vax. Like, in other words,
Oh yeah,
do you
absolutely.
get them on tape, or do you have them on tape?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as a filmmaker, that's how we do it, right? Like, I've been working with very sensitive information for a few years now, so there's normally like 6 copies in different places. And that's definitely one big thing is I don't see the governing body like going back on it. I feel like they've posted it and they're going to try to stick with it. But yeah, we definitely have backups.
Yeah. And just to be clear, to put everything in context a little better, when did you and the church separate?
When I hit it was around the point where I kind of mentioned this in the film, but I didn't really go deeply into it. But basically, in the church or in the Kingdom Hall, what is a normal practice is for an older member to study the Bible with you. And a lot of people have, like, a lot of current Jehovah's Witnesses will have a Bible study with a worldly person and so on and so forth. And so my older sister and I were studying the Bible with a sister in the congregation. And that means basically a weekly or bi-weekly meeting. We'd study one of the books that, was inspired by the governing body. And you would basically kind of be mentored by this person. So we had a relationship with this woman for, I think it was almost like 2 years. And when my sister just mentioned that she was going to college, the sister basically had this big blow up and basically said she was terminating the Bible study with my sister, but also me, and I didn't really do anything. My sister was just going to college, like that was it. And so after that point, like, I just never, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I was kind of confused. I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. I literally did nothing wrong. And just because someone in my family did something, you're ending a Bible study with me? That's weird. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of slowly backed away after that happened because more personal family reasons. My mom has 6 kids, and so it was hard for her to go alone. So at that point, it was just me and my older sister going. And we made a point to go. Like, we tried really hard, and I felt like I was trying so hard. But, if you don't do everything exactly right, it's not, there's this threshold of conduct you have to meet. And if you don't, that's a big problem. You have to fit this mold. And I don't think I fit the mold. But it never ended up being like a fallout for me, which I'm very thankful for. And like I said, I did meet a lot of people later on I maintained a lot of those relatiures until COVID hit. Yeah. And then that changed.
One of the things that struck me during the film is there's a scene where you're talking about not being able to do the pledge and being, kind of scared about having to not do that in front of all your friends at school. Right.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you can talk to how that experience of sort of always growing up as sort of different from the rest of the kids in school may have influenced, the person that you are today. You have done so many things for such a young person, and, been brave enough to stand against the crowd in so many different ways. Do you think that being within the church at a young age had an influence on that?
Absolutely. And I always say that to people, like, that in many ways it did influence me in a good way, right? There's a lot of hard things that came out of being raised a Jehovah's Witness, but there's also a lot of beautiful things, right? Like, so Jehovah's Witnesses don't separate the youth into their own group. So you're always with people of all ages. So I've always been comfortable having conversations with anyone, no matter how old they are, Whereas like a lot of times you meet younger people, this like kind of Gen Z era, like they have a hard time just having a conversation with someone who's older than them.
Right.
So that was a cool thing. And also like, yeah, I mean, I was so used to being different. I had no problem standing up for what I believed in. And yes, maybe those basically, you know, the motives behind that might have been because I was afraid of, you know, that I would die in Armageddon if I, you know, did those things. But what it did teach me was how to stand up for myself when I actually really believe in something. And a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are like that. And I have a lot of respect for that. Someone in the comments as well is asking about people being disfellowshipped for talking against the vaccine. That's absolutely true. I have talked to people, many people, who were disfellowshipped for having it, or for not having it, and or for talking out openly against it. And many people, if they weren't disfellowshipped, they were basically edged to the side and shunned indirectly. That has absolutely happened.
Let's see. Meredith is asking, she says, I'm wondering, as a follower of Jesus as Lord who works with young Jehovah's Witnesses, is there anything I can do or say to help open these young people's eyes and get them thinking critically about what they are being taught?
Yeah, I think that really the way we do that is to not come off as extreme, right? Like, I think the most important thing, and having been someone who's been in this for a long time, is like just to love. And I may not be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, but I absolutely believe in God, and I pray and I read the Bible. And the biggest message that we get from that, right, is to love one another. And so this might be a bit more of a floaty answer than you were expecting, but I really do believe that like cultivating those relationships is the first step, right? So no matter what it's been, whatever issues I've had, if I had disagreements with people, to things that have been really, really polarized, is to walk in love, right? And to slowly bring things up, right? So you don't even have to say, I have this view, but I heard some people thought, you know, whatever about that. What do you think about that? You know, or I saw this little thing the other day, you know, these tiny truth bombs. And Craig and I were talking about this earlier. It's like, you can't just drop this bomb on somebody, even though we want to, because we're like, oh my gosh, don't you know, like, this is a big deal. Like, this is a really like scary, horrible thing. But you can't drop that bomb on them because they're not going to be receptive to it. So it takes dropping those little seeds of truth, whether it be a little article, or what I find is just having conversations with people, in-person conversations, is the most effective way of, you know, kind of leading people down that path. You don't want to change their minds. You just want to plant the seeds, right? And let them do what they want with that information.
Right. Somebody named Naomi is asking what it's like to be a young female filmmaker today.
Ooh. You know, honestly, it's really fun. No, I love that. So I feel like the feminine energy is very, depending on who you are, is very comforting, right? And as being a documentarian, what I love is to create relationships. So every film I've worked on, the more I got involved, the more those relationships opened up and changed. And relationship building is so important. And being an interviewer that can sit down with someone and make them comfortable and actually become their friend. You care about them and they know you care about them. You watch them open up and flourish, and they'll tell stories that they might have never told anyone, or they might be vulnerable with you and cry on the phone or cry on camera with you. And because you've gained that trust with them, you are able to tell their story to the world. And I find that to be such a beautiful gift of my feminine touch, right? Is to be able to create that safe environment, that safe space with people where they can fully open up and be vulnerable, and that people trust me to tell their stories. There's nothing more rewarding than that. And so sometimes if you can't get your way as a young female filmmaker, you just kind of have to bat your eyes and laugh a little bit and, be friendly with people. And normally they're very receptive because I don't think I come off as a threatening person. I hope I don't. So
I would
it's
say
kind of,
you have a unique combination of, everything you just described, and also a real critical eye. You're typically not presenting the typical narrative in the work that I've seen that you've done. It's a different perspective than most people understand, and you do a good job of presenting those alternative viewpoints with, as you say, sort of an empathy to the listener, the watcher.
Yeah, you got to be gentle, be gentle, and also be a truth seeker, a truth teller, and that's a big part of our purpose, right? It's like, I don't think that I would be absolutely nothing if it weren't for the people here watching this, if it weren't for the people that share the films I make, right? So everybody has their part that they play. And so like, that's a big thing for me, is just like telling the truth and like trying to find voices that haven't had the chance to be heard, and telling those stories. And then people like those who are sitting here are the ones who share it and the world gets to see it. So I think it's a beautiful exchange.
Yep. Well, speaking of that, we're right at the top of the hour here, and I want to make sure everybody knows the film will be available on the DailyClout site. In fact, you'll get an email, I think, later tonight that'll have a link so you can get access to it, as well as links to other, the other films that Claire's mentioned and some others that she's done or worked on. And I didn't mention earlier, but, Claire and DailyClout have an ongoing relationship, and we're really excited about that. So we're going to be working with Claire to do some of the types of work that she's been discussing going forward. So we'd love to hear your ideas about, what are some aspects that Claire can bring to what we're doing from a video and film point of view. We'd love to hear what you guys think, and I'm sure Claire would too. But Claire, I really, really appreciate you doing this for us. I think, number one, the film is just really beautiful. It's as I said earlier, a very, it's just an excellent, eye-opening experience that's very, I don't know the right word other than to say sort of gentle in the way that it opens your eyes without hitting you over the head. I think you did a great job. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I like, in closing, I think that there are a lot of truths within Jehovah's Witnesses that get looked over. And like I said before, my goal is to never, talk horribly about these people. What I wanted to do, my goal is to shed light on some of these truths, so that people can move forward. And if anyone in here wants to email me, we can drop my email in the chat. I'd love to hear from people and have some of those discussions. Because I saw there were some people that I didn't get to respond to, and I am all about that. So I'm going to drop my email right there. If you want to talk to me, let's go for it. J-Dubs unite. And yeah, I'm really excited to continue working with DailyClout. And if you guys have any ideas, definitely reach out to me. I, once again, like to try to tell stories of people whose voices have never been heard. So if you know any instances of that, or any resources, or anybody who wants to talk to me, definitely shoot me an email, and I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Claire. We really, really appreciate the film and you taking the time to talk with everybody. And we'll look forward to doing this again very soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Naomi and you guys for doing this with me. It's been such an incredible experience, and I can't wait to tell more stories with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf of DailyClout, and I am asking you to please, if you like the video you just saw, support us, become a member, donate. You can send checks to P.O. Box 24, Millerton, New York, 12546, or go to DailyClout, DailyClout, become a member or donate. Thank you so much for your support. Every penny goes for paying our hardworking staff, paying hosting costs, and paying our lawyers who have been leading the fight to keep you safe and free, to keep the Constitution safe and to keep you free. Thank you so much.